The real problem is that we declared our definitions at a time when we didn't know what the hell we were talking about. Now we know at least the definitions of gender are a long continuum. Hello again and welcome back to another episode of yours truly. My name is Anas and we're going to be going over another interesting topic today. So without further ado, let's jump right in. This is a very interesting topic that has been it's very sensitive. Before I wreck anything, let me just explain to you what the topic is. Transgender men shouldn't be allowed on women's sport teams and vice versa. That's basically the topic, and I know that it's a very sensitive topic, and people are either very strong with it or against it, right? And it's not necessarily a specific group of people. For example, people think that only transgenders or members of the LGBTQ community are very strong in favor of this. Not necessarily. I've met men who are gay who are not in favor of this, not for specific reasons, but more so of like their own opinion of it, their own understanding of what the transitioning is. And it's not necessarily based off of science or facts or anything. It's more of, this is how I understand it, this is how it should be. And again, it's everybody has their own opinion, and usually in cases like this, it's one way or another. I'll go ahead and read the article, and it's not really an article, it's more of a discussion, like the previous video I've uploaded, and maybe let me know in the comments what you think, or, message me. Let me know what you think. Alright, so let's start. So this is the main post. So transgender men shouldn't be allowed on women's sport teams and vice versa. I just want to clarify, before you read this post, I strongly believe in trans rights. I have not heard most positions on the situation, and I think my position is most likely flawed. I know that identifying as a female, you would want to be on a female sports team. But I've heard, but not confirmed, that transgender men have an advantage on track teams and such, while transgender women have a disadvantage on men's sport teams. I do not know how a transgender-only sports team would go, because likely it would mainly be transgender men who win. I'm not sure I understand that point. I can't think of a solution that is fair to everyone, and want to hear your opinions on the matter and the pros and cons of each position on it. Alright, now just stopping right there. That's the end of the article, the post. So how I see it is, there is no really middle ground. The only thing that I could think of that would be fair to everybody, and again, this is not based off science or anything, it's just based off of my understanding, and this is my opinion on it, is a transgender team only, but one team that's only male to female and another team that's female to male, maybe. That's the only thing that I could think of, because they're asking for what solutions could there be, because a team that would be transgender team only, most likely would be only men who win, which is not necessarily true. That depends on what kind of sport it is, obviously. But if it was a sport for only male to female, and another sport, or the same sport but only females to males that could participate in it, that's the only fair solution that I could think of, because then it's a level playing field for everybody, right? And again, even then it's not really a level, right? But because some people are genetically stronger, some people are genetically taller, you know what I mean? Like Shaq, for example, he's not exactly on the same playing level field as everybody else. While people may seem as great, for me, he's not. For me, he's a good player, but considering how big he is, how athletic he is for his size, for what he could do, he's doing okay. He could have dominated, but he hasn't really. All right, so just something to show. For example, a player that really puts in basketball may do, who might work 100 times harder than Shaq might not do as well as Shaq does, simply because of the genetic differences. All right, so no matter what you do, obviously you're never going to have that 100% level playing field, but there are ways which, could level it more, at least. All right, and that's the one that I just explained, having males to females only and females to males only, separate from the born female and the born men, might be a perfect solution. All right, so now let's read the first comment on here. So the only thing that makes sense with the growing number of trans individuals in sports is to abolish gender segregation of sports in favor of weight classes. Weaker men who are on par with stronger women is completely fair. And the person commented saying, I never thought of that, yet it is so blatantly obvious. Thank you. I disagree with that. They have oversimplified it in a way that it doesn't make sense. So weight classes doesn't really mean anything. That's usually how it is in sports such as UFC or wrestling, right? It's based off weight classes. So that's why you'll see somebody who's a little bit shorter and fat or muscular fight somebody who's taller but skinnier, right? Because they're the same weight. So in those cases, even to me, it doesn't make sense. But according to what they've said, weight classes is how it should be, which is it doesn't make sense for that reason that I've described, right? You could have somebody who's short and fat or short and muscular versus somebody who's tall and skinny or tall and a little in shape, which doesn't seem fair at all, right? So weight classes don't really make sense. I know it's used a lot in sports, but it's not perfect. It's nowhere near perfect, to be honest with you. I've seen this in sports. There was a trans female, I think it was in Texas, where a teen wrestler competed in the girls' division and won everything hands down. If you know much about wrestling, there is a huge difference between females and males in this sport. It would suck to have to compete as your birth gender and not your true gender. I disagree with the true gender part, right? It's a bit offensive, but I would think you should have to compete as your birth gender. I'm not sure what a happy medium would be. Well, thanks a lot for not really giving a happy medium, I guess. But basically, you have to compete as your birth gender, which again, it doesn't make any sense. All right? Competing as your birth gender, because if you've transitioned, let's say from male to female, if you've transitioned from male to female, you competing against somebody who is a male, right, born as a male, hasn't transitioned, there's a huge advantage and disadvantage there, right? So that's not really a solution. Now let's look at the next one, because that person really hasn't really given us anything. So many people might agree with you, but they also believe transgenders should not be discriminated against. There's also the problem of defining what gender is and where it is located. I don't think it's about location. The post is not yet over yet, by the way. But it's not about location. It's more about, I think what they meant is it's whether you were born with it or whether it's what's inside. I think that's what they meant. All right, now moving on. If we can determine what a female is, we are going to have a very hard time discriminating between males and females when selecting teams. The real problem is that we declared our definitions at a time when we didn't know what the hell we were talking about. Now we know at least that definitions of gender are a long continuum. That actually made me think. I've never heard that before, and it makes sense to a degree. The real problem is that we declared our definitions at a time when we didn't know what the hell we were talking about. Now we know at least the definitions of gender are a long continuum. That makes a lot of sense. All right. I don't think it's related to what we're talking about, though. I do think that we've declared what genders are not before we didn't know what we're talking about, but before we were introduced to different ones, to different people, right? Before we knew much about it, I guess. So I guess it's a bit similar, but the real issue here is whether they should be competing against each other in a sport or not. All right. Now, if it is again gender based and that is a different gender, so my initial solution, which would be, for example, male to female as one section, female to male as another section, that would work here because that's a different gender, right? But then the argument here is that it's not a different gender. It's the same gender as, so a male a male to a female is a female. But in reality, on the outside, they're not 100% on par with the female physicality. I don't know if that makes sense. So for example, an average male that would transition to a female would be naturally stronger than a female who hasn't transitioned, right? On the average female, right? I believe there was a study done that goes along the lines of the average female will only hit harder than 1 out of 1,000 males. It was something like that. They did a study where they had I don't know how many, let's say 1,000 males hit a bat or hit something, and then females do the same, and it was literally 1 out of a few thousand or 1,000. One woman would be stronger than, or the average woman would be stronger than 1 out of 1,000 or more men. All right, so that's we're talking about physical strength here, right? Physical as in literal strength, right? The power that you could deliver with a swing. Of course, each one has their own strength. Now, Joe Rogan was killed for being against trans. That was what the article said. While in reality, what he said was he was against trans in sports, right? It's more specifically violent sports, right? Wrestling, weightlifting, these sports where men genetically have an advantage over women. So his exact argument was that a man was fighting, I believe that was mentioned earlier in Texas, where it was a male to female trans, and they were dominating the sport and against females, and they had broken one woman's skull in the fight, right? I believe fractured it or something along those lines, and that's what his argument was. It's that it wasn't fair to the other woman in there. However, if you knew that you were going up against a trans and you were okay with it, or you wanted to do it, then you have every right to. And at the same time, if you wanted to go up against a male and fight them, then you have every right to do it, as long as both parties agree. That was his argument, which that point I agree with. All right, as long as you know who you're going up against and you want to do it, go for it. All right, so that should be it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed the discussion. There's obviously a lot more to be talking about here, and I actually had a lot more points, but I'm running out of time, so I'm gonna end it right there. And hopefully, I'll do a part 2 video if you guys like it. So let me know what you think down below. comment, subscribe, and let me know if you like it. All right, take care.